All right, so got to repost this video because the volume was bad last time. Every now and again, the volume gets bad. It's weird. Hopefully the volume's good this time because this will be not the first, not the second, but the third time doing this video. First time, Pablo had an accident. Second time, the volume was bad, so we're going to do it again. But my man, Sean, we'll call him Shawnee B. All right, Shawnee B from the hood, from the block, Shawnee B. He says, I won the game. It's a time to get out, essentially. It's a time to stop playing. And so I looked at his portfolio here on Right Capital. I'm not going to share, obviously, what he's got with you, and you don't know who this guy is. But here his allocations right here, 80-20 essentially. 80 stocks, 20% bonds. And you can see he's got a 5.6% expected rate of return, EROR, the expected rate of return, with a 13% standard deviation. All right, so I've said this a couple times not that long ago, but I'm going to say it again. We're looking at from a Monte Carlo perspective with 3 standard deviations. What we're saying is if we have an expected rate of return of 5.5, all right, so that's the middle, that's the median, our average rate of return. Yeah, got somebody, hold on a second. All right, so 5.5, we have a standard deviation of, just for simplicity, 13. So remember, the standard deviation, all it is the variance around the average rate of return. How much do we expect the average rate of return will be a variant from the average? And I think, if memory serves on the stupid statistical stuff on this, is they take I think it's the square root of the variance, if that makes sense. And so we got a square root of the variance, and that's our standard deviation. Because standard deviation is not 1, but 2, but 3 times we're using financial planning with a 99.8% probability. I think it's 99. It's high. It's the high 90s, whatever it is. We think on any given year, your portfolio will be within 3 standard deviations around the average. So if the average is 5.5 on the positive side, and for simplicity, we have a standard deviation 3 times of 13. We times a 13 by 3. So we have 5.5 plus or minus 39. So we would basically say in this case, we're going to have a high side of 44.5 and the low side of 34.5. So in any given year, in our bell curve here, now trust me, we still have fat tails, which means things that should not happen very often happen a lot more than they should. But this is what even Benoit Mandelbrot says Monte Carlo's way to go. So if Benoit says it, I'm good to go with that. Anyway, the point being is on any given year, we would expect our rate of return to be no less than negative 34 on the upside, on the downside, and no more than 44 on the up, if that makes sense. All right, so we'll just say 35 on the down for simplicity. What did the S&P 500 do in 2008? It was down 37. So my man Shawnee B here has an 80-20 portfolio. All right, that did, in relative to risk reward, that did worse essentially when you factor in the 20% bonds than the S&P 500 did in 2008, which was the worst market we've ever had. That's not true, Josh. 1930. No, 1930 had like a 9.9% deflation. So we're giving him a historically low average rate of return with a historically high downside risk, a la 2008. Now again, the Monte Carlo doesn't assume that downside risk happens all the time. It's completely random, but it could. We don't know. And that's what we're saying. So now the alternative would be for him to stop playing the game. Well, what if he went to, in this case, an all bonds? And so for all bonds, I'd given him 4% with a standard deviation of, I think, 4.5. It was 4.5. So we're given a 4% rate of return with a standard deviation of 4.5, which means on any given year, an all bond portfolio, we would have a variance, again, and we're going to take the variance and make it with the standard deviations. We would expect a rate of return to be no worse than 9.5%. All right, so we have a 9.5% downside risk, an average rate of return of 4, versus a 5.5% average rate of return of the stocks with a downside risk of negative 35. The upside, of course, is the stocks give them a plus 45 upside or whatever it was, and the bonds give them a, I don't know, 17%, I think is what it was. The interesting thing is the bond market did worse than our third standard deviation last year. That's how bad it was. I can't stress this enough. The bond market no one ever has predicted the bond market to do like it did in 2022. No one. All the standard deviation models are wrong, man. All there is to it. So we're saying, okay, if we sacrifice the difference between 5.5 and 4, that's 1.5% rate of return on an annual basis, you know, for many, many years to come. Because my man Shawnee B is like, he's going to retire in 3 to 4 years. His wife's a couple years younger than him. He's only going to be like in late 50s or something like that. I can't remember. Maybe early 60s, late 50s. So if you sacrifice that 1.5% rate of return, we have a whole lot less on the downside. Is that worth it? All right. I hope that makes sense. So let's go back to the graph here. You can see, here we are. A 4.5%, is that 5 or 6? 4.6, too much dust in here. Yeah, 4.6. It's all the same. But anyway, you can see 100% bonds. Now, last year, I wouldn't have bonds at 4.1. I think I had bonds at 2 because the Treasury, 10-year Treasury is like running around 1.5 to 2. It's crazy. So the bonds now, the higher interest rates, make it a lot more comforting for me to say, if you won the game, get out. So the question is, can this portfolio withstand this? So let's take a look. All right, so what we've done here is we see our current plan, 80-20. We have a 95% probability of success, leaving to their youngins $1.25 million, and that's in today's dollars. You can't really see it, but the blue means I put it for today's dollars. Not adjusted for inflation, in real dollars, not nominal. So he'd spend his money like drunken sailors, have a good party time like it's 1999, and still die, leaving $1.25 million of financial assets, not real estate, not your firearms, not your baseball card collection, not your dogs. So 95% probability. That's pretty good. I take that 100 times out of 100. In fact, I say to Shawnee B, why don't you start spending a little bit more, man? We're leaving your kids too much money. All right, but if we went to a more conservative portfolio, we went up to 100% probability of success. Why? Because we took the downside risk off. This is exactly how this works. You take the downside risk away. It reduces the downside inherently, which means you have less volatility and less back-to-back markets like we could have in 2001 and 2 or 2007, 8, and 9, 1973, 74, 1929, 30, and whatnot. So we take some of the downside risk off the table, but because we have a less rate of return, we're only leaving the kiddos half of what we're leaving over here. All right, and so this is the conundrum. Now, it's not even much of a conundrum to me because I'm like, dude, you know, if you're a couple years out of retiring, I think it makes sense to take some risk off the table to get out of the, I mean, I can't tell this guy what to do. It's his money, but 100%, because the one thing we got to avoid is that, again, sequence of return risk. And now we're being rewarded for parking in bonds and cash and CDs and stuff where we weren't being rewarded like that before. It makes sense. That doesn't mean I have to stay over here, by the way. I mean, Sean asked me, he goes, dude, don't you think 5% seed rates, I can just lock those in and sit tight? So, but you're not going to get 5% for long because right now the 10-year Treasury is back below 3.4. 30-year Treasury is 3.6. I think I thought 13-week money is at 4.5 or 4.75. I can't remember. But the short-term money's high, the long-term money's low, and that's not going to stay like that forever, which means the long-term money is going to stay, in my opinion, flat, and the short-term money is going to come back down. So again, that's why I was talking. If you can get 5% fixed annuities for 5 years, I'd be on that like what, on rice. So we wake up, my man Shawnee B retires a couple years into retirement. You know, he's got 5% a year. It's like, all right, looking pretty good. I think I can take more risk now, and then I have a good gauge in my retirement. I hope that makes sense. It's a big deal. It's just the couple years out, man. If you won the game, stop playing, dudes. It doesn't make sense to take risks. What are you taking the risk for? Now, here, again, 95 to 100 is all the same. Again, if you're at 90% or more, you're not spending enough. If you're at below 80%, you're spending too much. But, you know, you don't have to stay in bonds for the rest of your life. In fact, you're probably going to have lower rate bonds there in a couple of years anyway. I mean, the market doesn't look good. I think the economy is not in a good place right now. I can see in my own business. I talk to people all the time. I talked to a guy today who just got known he's being laid off. It's happening, dude. So you can see it all over the place. And this isn't good for the long-term economic prospects of this country. So taking some risk off the table, locking in good interest rates while you can, makes sense to me. Love your thoughts. Hopefully the volume works here this time. Don't forget, live stream tonight, 8 o'clock. We're going to devour Mr. Al Einstein. Be there or be unaware. See ya. Secondly, I always forget to tell people to sign up for my Locals channel. We do live streams on Locals every Friday at 4 p.m. It's in the Doobly Duke. And if you're interested in my email list, sign up for my email list. It's in the Doobly Duke. I haven't sent an email for like 3 months. I probably should do that today, as a matter of fact. It's been a while. All right, love your thoughts. We'll see ya. Wouldn't want to be ya.